What's up, gamers? Duma here, and welcome back to the Game Room. We are back and locked in for update 46. Today we have our first subclassing build, and it's heavyweight stuff. This thing is 1 bar, 2 bars optional if you like, but not necessary at all. I only use 1 bar for all the playtesting. It parses 120k, cleared our trial boss solo test of St. Lothus in 4 minutes and 42 seconds, which is the fastest on the channel now by miles for these type of builds. Speed cleared veteran Vadishran with no deaths or sigils in 18 minutes and some change. Also now the fastest on the channel for these type of builds. Flat-footed, mowed down world bosses. Doesn't use Oaken Soul or Pell Order. Doesn't use any trial or dungeon gear other than a one-piece monster helm. Light attacks are mostly optional, and both the solo and DPS versions are using almost the exact same gear. Like, what? Subclassing is crazy. And I think we can shape this up in some form for PvP, which we'll be checking out later on the stream at some point. This game is about to change something heavy for sure. I'm going to share a bunch of details with you today, both of how I got here and various tests I did just to give you some tools to help make sense of subclassing, and then just get an idea of options you can use as well for what interests you. Also, a quick preface, I'm not saying these are the best options at all. I'm totally confident there's more ways to raise the bar in different ways. This is just the options with receipts that I have today, with the time I had to give it. I wish I had more because I know it can get even better than what this is. It was a totally crazy journey to get here at this version of the build. I spent almost 7 hours on stream last week with the goal of making a primarily dot focus build, kind of aiming for something like an old school World of Warcraft Affliction Warlock, if you know what that is. Just tons of dots and heals. We started off with the usual stuff: Necromancer Rapid Rot passive, Great Lord Sacrifice dot increase ability, Inferno Staff, Thaumaturge CP, Deadly Strike set for more dot damage, and then mixing in just about every subclass skill line from DK dots to Templar shenanigans, but always using the Nightblade Assassination skill line as a staple for its raw DPS increases. Also with different squirrely sets to see what would work. Almost everything was completely mid at best. Most of it just totally yuck. The very last thing I did was check out the Arcanist skill line and did some weird dot and beam things, which also didn't work out super hot because I completely missed that beam is now considered direct damage rather than damage over time, which someone in chat informed me of on stream. Thank you, by the way, which changes everything. I ended up fully scrapping the whole dot thing, said screw it, we ball, and just started to mess around with beam subclass builds. People wanted to see some of the new sets, so I ended up pairing one of the new crafted sets of Tideborn with the Deadly Strike set we were using, and damage started to shoot up real quick. I ended that stream with this really goofy Arcanist Nightblade Warden animal companion setup, using sub assault before every beam, and comfortably sat above 100k DPS, thinking we were in good shape. After that stream, for those that saw that version of the build, I really picked apart the logs and realized that wasn't a very good option at all, due to sub assault not really being worth the globals versus just beaming and then juicing beam as much as you can. So I leaned into that even more. First, I started with group DPS options and paired Arcanist Beam plus Nightblade Assassination with just about every skill line that even kind of made sense. I messed around with really weird things like the Warden's Winter's Embrace line, using Arctic Blast to take advantage of the chilled status effect, and the Arcanist passive Psychic Legion for more status effect shenanigans. Raw damage and crit juicing setups with things like Barb Trap, weird sorcerer stuff with pets, and everything else I could think of with the time I had. What I found was one of the easiest and best ways of flat increasing beam and adding DPS without complicating the setup, changing rotations, or reducing beam uptime is the Templar Adric Spear skill line, using only its passives. This is going to give you roughly 5.5k flat DPS from Burning Light, then a 6% weapon and spell damage increase with a little bonus of extra armor. The idea is to use every element we can to juice the damage of beam and reduce the time not beaming, i.e. pressing other buttons. This turned out to be 120k DPS using both versions of beam, with a very slightly different setup to accommodate the beam's cost. And that's it. For solo content, everything is the same, minus swapping a chest piece from medium to heavy, which is simple since it's crafted, dropping the Templar skill line for the Sorcerer Stormcalling skill line for tankiness, damage, and utility, or double Arcanist skill lines with the Soldier skill line for insane tankiness, and a really cool thing that happens where you quite literally get all 3 Crux back while beaming at times. So you literally beam right into another beam. This is really simple to play and incredibly effective. I'm late to this subclass testing party, and I knew things were going to be wild, but I didn't expect things to be this crazy, honestly. There's a lot to cover here, but I'm going to be moving quick for you to respect your time. The written guide is also up and available for you now over at thegameroom.tv, with all new build format to make searching for builds both easier and less mobile lag. I put a link in the video description for you under the build FAQ page that talks about this a little bit, going over the changes, why, and where the old builds went. All right, let's go. For this setup, you want a base class of Arcanist due to the scribing class script we'll be using. We're going to play it as Stamina, so a Dark Elf is great for damage output, and then we put all 64 points into Stamina. For gear, for all build versions, we'll be using the Deadly Strike set to increase our beam damage by 15%, and then the new Tideborn set to increase it further by 12%. And then the 2, 3, and 4 set bonuses on both sets are generally great for all aspects of DPS. For the group DPS setup, we put it together like this. We're going to use all medium armor, sacrificing some crit and going way over crit damage cap to increase our stamina recovery with a stamina ability cost reduction to make it sustainable, with the side benefit of lots of extra weapon damage. Both sets are in medium, so anything can go anywhere as long as both 5 sets are active. All divine traits with max stamina enchants. We pair that with a precise lightning staff with a few options for enchants. First, let's look at your beam options. You can go pragmatic beam for self-shielding and a bit more RNG overall DPS, with the average area about 115k DPS, but I have hit 120k with it as well with a bit of crit RNG. But exhausting Fate Carver is much more consistently around 120k area. However, at a significantly more stamina drain. If you choose to go exhausting for the more consistent, slightly higher DPS, I tried every stamina sustain option that made sense, from a Magma Incarnate Helm to Recovery Glyph to trying various sustain abilities from different skill lines. And ultimately, the least DPS loss for accommodating the extra sustain needed is simply adding an absorbed stamina weapon enchant. But even then, it's tight. So just a warning for that. I recommend going pragmatic beam for the self-shielding and virtually zero sustain issues at the cost of slightly less DPS, with crit RNG always on the table to get around exhausting's average DPS. It's just less stressful and you never have to worry about stamina, and it's way more tanky. If you go that route, honestly, I don't have empirical receipts for what weapon enchant is best. You would think by the numbers that weapon damage enchant would be superior here, as it's going to proc right before your beam and lasts for most all of the beam, juicing the majority of your damage by a pretty significant weapon damage amount. But my 120k parse using pragmatic beam was with the flame enchant, while also not using the magic banner glyph and using shock for direct damage, losing on some of the burning damage. But if I were to suggest one here, I would say weapon damage. On that note of scripts for banner, both shock boosting direct damage and magic boosting your magical damage are both roughly the same percent of your damage, around 91 to 92% if using pragmatic beam. But if you're using exhausting beam, you will have slightly more magic damage due to the extra beam damage. However, again with RNG, I ended up at exactly 120k with both script options using exhausting beam. So they are extremely close. I wouldn't sweat it too much if you only have one or the other and don't want to go farming scripts. If you even have to. I don't remember if those come from the vendor. All of that variable and inconsistency could also be a bit from PTS shenanigans, which it was pretty rough here the past week or so. I was actually very frustrated at one point with random big drops in output from who knows what's going on PTS related. So it's still a little bit of a mystery for me for currently what is the actual best combinations of all the things we talked about here, as I haven't been able to replicate in game what the math shows what should be better on paper. So I'm just sharing the receipts I do have to give you actual concrete examples of output I was able to produce, even though I don't think they're technically the best min-maxed options. With the information I present to you, I'm always about standing on my receipts rather than hypotheticals. If you do test this out and get notably different results, please let me know. I'd be very interested in that information. The PTS was kind of a mess, and I'm still questioning why some things did or didn't do as well as they did with all the tests. Hopefully more clarity in the near future. Then we have the Velothi Mythic, increasing our damage by another 15% at the cost of light attack damage, which is perfect for beam builds and pretty standard stuff really. Bloodthirsty traits with physical harm enchants on jewelry, and then a slime crawl helm for more crit. CP is here for you as well. Exploiter is for parsing and if you have off balance in your group. Otherwise, you can use something like Untamed Aggression here instead. Likewise for celerity, you can go Bloody Renewal for more stamina sustain as things die around you in live content. Abilities are here for you as well, which I'm going to break down a little more in depth for you. And then I have the banner script here for you, which is pretty standard stuff in general. Heroism aside, I believe. 5. Last, we have the Thief Mundus, Lavafoot Food, and Weapon Crit Potions. You can use Artaeum Takeaway Broth or the cheaper version Dubious Camoran Throne for a bit more health if you prefer, as well for a little loss in damage, which we have plenty of, so you should be fine. There may be a better technical min-max potion here as well. I didn't have time to mess around with it any further, but you get your Brutality from slotting Scholarship. So this gives you your crit buff, stamina sustain, and then health and major fortitude, which never hurts. And we have heroism already on banner. For skills, first we have the Nightblade Assassination skill line that is here purely for passive benefit for both the passives and abilities we use. Since we're using Velothi and 1 bar, we can stack skills on the back bar that are effective on the front bar. First, we have Relentless Focus. We just leave this stacked at 10 stacks for a static weapon damage increase on the front bar. Concealed Weapon for a free minor expedition buff, and then our banner. You can add whatever other utility options you like back here. I didn't even have a weapon equipped back here for most of my testing, and these other ability spots were left blank for me. On the front bar, we have 1 Nightblade ability here passively for more crit chance from the Pressure Points passives. You can use what you want here, but I went with Piercing Mark for Major Breach, which is really useful for live content, as well as some neat niche uses like throwing it on a mob about to die for a full health bar heal. That's it with Assassination. We don't actually use any of the abilities for our DPS. The next skill line is the Templar Adric Spear line, which, as we discussed earlier, again, only here for the 6% weapon damage buff and free Burning Light DPS. Very simple. For our Arcanist abilities, we have Inspired Scholarship, a passive ability for more damage and free Crux generation. Between this and your Crux generation from Banner, you normally only need 1 flail, and then you're right back into Beam, which brings us to Flail. This is what you use to build a Crux, gain a 5% damage buff, and free healing. Between Beam shields and Flail heals, you have more than enough healing for group content. Our ultimate, Languid Eye, just a really good DPS option from the class skill line. Rotation is super simple. Keep Scholarship active, use ultimate when it's available, and typically you just flail, beam, flail, beam, flail, beam. Sometimes you have to double flail due to banner or scholarship RNG, but it's usually just 1. Try to light attack if you can with flail or beam to proc your weapon enchant and ult gen, and I'll have the parse opener for you at the end with gameplay to see that in action as well if needed. And that's it. Crazy simple and super powerful. Not much more to it. For solo content, we have lots of options here. First, let me show you this crazy thing. Since beam is now direct damage and hits every 0.3 seconds, so 3 times a second, it makes Reaving Blows incredibly powerful for it. And since Reaving Blows is based off direct damage you do, and we have an entire kit specifically designed to juice our beam damage, the healing you get from Reaving Blows more or less covers your Pale Order mythic needs for most solo content, with the exception of maybe beefy veteran dungeons. But I soloed everything with Velothi. I did it twice with Pale Order also, testing out a tankier option, but it's not necessary at all for most everything you're going to do. But I'll give you both options. So that's the only CP change we make, is dropping Exploiter for Reaving Blows. All of our gear is exactly the same, except we use a heavy chest, just like all the other solo builds on the channel using crafted sets or multi-weight sets like Savara's. I've usually had a heavy reinforced chest for more damage mitigation. So same thing here that you've seen before. We also swapped to a helm with a line of penetration like Krog's, and then the Serpent Mundus. Also, I do recommend one of the food options with a bit more health like Artaeum or Dubious for sure here in solo content. For our third skill line, just like the parsing option, I went and tried everything with a specific goal of getting Major Resolve. On that note, you can also get Minor Resolve for your banner on the third script for more tankiness if wanted, but it's not needed for most things. I never used it. There are 2 main options I'm going to suggest here. The first is the Sorcerer Storm Calling line. This was the main setup I used for everything. You get a lot baked in with this option. You get some general decent juice from the passives, but more importantly, it gives us access to Boundless Storm. This gives you Major Resolve, making you tanky, last 30 seconds, which is a very long time and super good for a beam build because it doesn't cut into your beam uptime much. It deals even more AoE damage around you. That's also increased by the magic script of your banner if you went that route, and then you get Major Expedition. We already have Minor Expedition from Concealed Weapon on the back bar, and then Celerity CP, so now you have Major and Minor Expedition, making you stupid fast, running around, and legitimately will allow you to not only have fun fun flying around, but do things like actually score push in veteran arenas, which I showed you earlier. I went for speed and not specifically score here and cleared it in 18 minutes and some change. Kill ads along the way and you have a legitimate score pushing contender here. And the ability just looks awesome, which of course is important, especially if using the magic banner script and then the blue Arcanist beam, which sadly I didn't have on the PTS. You can also just slot this on one of the open back bar slots if you like, and keep your breach and crit buff on the front bar with the Nightblade mark. Lots of wiggle room with this one as long as you aren't cutting into your beam time. Now, if you want to go super stupid tanky, you can slot Pale Order and then check this other Arcanist skill line out here of Soldier of Apocrypha. The passives are crazy good, giving you more armor, more sustain, and health recovery, the rare buff of minor evasion, and then extra ult gen. Then we slot Cruxweave armor for major resolve, and every 6 seconds when taking damage, it gives you another Crux. So with Scholarship, Banner, and Cruxweaver, at times you can literally just spam beam, because as you're in one beam, you get all 3 Crux for your next beam. So silly. And then just for good measure, to ensure we never die, we slot Bubble Ulti here, which more or less makes you immortal for as long as it lasts. I soloed most everything with both of these final setups. Both are extremely good. If you want to never die, use Soldier of Apocrypha. If you want super stupid good damage and still probably never die, then Stormcalling. Both are equally as viable. One more tanky, one more damage, both with all the tools you need to solo everything you need to solo, with the exception of maybe sweaty veteran dungeons. I'm not sure. I didn't get into that with it just yet. Maybe we'll check that out on stream here soon. And that's it, gamers. I'm super excited about this one being so good for our first subclass build here. I'll leave you with a bit of gameplay so you can see in action. If you're watching this on release day of the video, I'll be streaming the new DLC. Feel free to come check that out and say hello. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.
Bow to your highness. Let the trumpet sing. The king is back. The king is back. Yeah, the king is back. Tell him Marcus the ring, championship ring. And I did it with the team. Shout out to the team. Tell him Marcus the ring, championship ring. And I did it with the team. Shout out to the team. Yeah, the king is back. The king is back. It's here, royalty, roll out the red carpet. Yeah, the king is back. Bow to your highness. Let the trumpet sing. Bow to your highness.